I used to believe humans were fragile. That belief nearly got me killed. My name is Kael'thir of the Varelian Trade Guild, a species known for resilience, intelligence, and, if I may be honest, superiority. Our kind evolved under crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, and relentless predators. We are survivors. Humans? They came from a soft world, at least that's what the Council said. Low gravity, mild climate, minimal evolutionary pressure. In other words, weak. So when I was assigned a human companion for my long-haul trade mission across the Outer Rim, I wasn't thrilled. His name was Daniel Harper, average height. No visible armor plating, no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons whatsoever. His skin looked thin, vulnerable, and his movements calm, almost lazy. He smiled a lot. That made me trust him even less. "Kyle, you worry too much," Daniel said one cycle, leaning casually against the cargo bay railing as we drifted through the silent void. "I do not worry," I replied. "I calculate risks," he grinned. Same thing, just with better PR. I didn't understand the joke. Humans often spoke in contradictions. Our ship, the Asterix Vale, wasn't built for combat. It was a transport vessel, mid-sized, lightly shielded, and carrying high-value trade goods, rare minerals, bioengineered seeds, and Varelian neural crystals. We had minimal defense systems. Standard protocol. After all, piracy in this sector was air, or so we thought. The first sign of trouble came as a flicker, a brief, almost imperceptible distortion across the forward sensors. I noticed it immediately. "Unidentified anomaly," I muttered, tapping into the console. "Vector shift, bearing 031, distance closing rapidly." Daniel didn't move, didn't even look concerned. "Probably just interference," he said. I turned sharply toward him. "Interference does not alter trajectory." Before he could respond, the alarm screamed. Red light flooded the bridge. "Warning, hostile vessel detected. Shields impact in 12 seconds. My heart's tightened. "Pirates," I whispered. And not just any pirates. The signature was unmistakable. Drathari raiders. If you've never heard of the Drathari, consider yourself fortunate. They don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, they board, they slaughter, and they strip ships down to their atoms. "Kyle," Daniel said, finally pushing himself upright, his tone different, focused, sharp. "How many?" I scanned quickly. "One attack cruiser. Possibly 20 to 30 boarding units." He nodded once, just once. No panic, no fear, just acceptance. That unsettled me more than anything. "Shields won't hold," I said. "We must initiate escape." "No time," Daniel interrupted. The impact hit us before I could argue. The ship shook violently. Consoles sparked. The hum of the engines faltered as the Drathari vessel latched onto our hull like a predator sinking its claws into prey. Then came the sound I will never forget. Metal tearing. They were cutting their way in. "Seal the bulkheads!" I shouted, already moving. "Already on it," Daniel replied. Fingers flying across the controls, efficient, fast, too fast. "Arm yourself," I ordered, grabbing a plasma rifle from the emergency rack and tossing him a sidearm. He caught it smoothly, checked the weight, then frowned. "You got anything better?" I stared at him. "That is a military-grade plasma sidearm." "Yeah," he said, unimpressed. "I meant something reliable." Before I could respond, he turned and sprinted toward the lower deck. "Where are you going?" I demanded. "Getting something I trust." The first breach occurred in Cargo Bay 3. I saw it on the internal feed, a glowing line carved through reinforced alloy. Then exploded inward, smoke sparks, and then they stepped through Drathari.tall, armored, multi-limbed, monstrosities with bladed appendages and glowing crimson. "Optics, hunters, killers, death. Multiple hostiles on board," I transmitted. "Engaging defensive protocol." My hands trembled, but I raised my weapon anyway. This was it. We were going to die. Because of a weak ship, a weak plan, and a weak human. The Drathari advanced quickly, moving in coordinated formation. One of them raised a pulse cannon and fired. The blast tore through a support column just meters from me. I fired back. My shot struck their armor, and barely slowed them. "Impossible," I muttered. Their plating was too strong, too advanced. I fell back, step by step toward the central corridor. "Daniel," I called into the comm. "Where are you?" Static, then A calm voice. On my way. Another explosion. Closer this time. The Drathari were pushing through. One lunged at me. Blades flashing. I barely dodged. The edge slicing across my shoulder plating. Pain surged through me. I stumbled. Fell. My weapon skidded across the floor. The Drathari loomed over me, raising its blade for the final strike. I closed my eyes. This was the end. Bang. The sound was wrong. Not plasma, not energy. Something older. Something louder. I opened my eyes. The Drathari froze. A perfect hole burned through its head. It collapsed instantly. Dead. I turned slowly and saw him, Daniel, standing at the end of the corridor, holding a weapon I had never seen. Before compact, solid, primitive, terrifying, smoke curled from its barrel. You okay? He asked casually, as if we weren't seconds from death. I stared at him. What was that? He glanced at the weapon. Oh, he said. This? A faint smile crossed his face. Just something from home. Another Drathari charged. Daniel didn't hesitate. Bang. Another one dropped. In that moment, I realized something. Something the Council had never understood. Something I had been blind to. Humans weren't weak. They were restrained. And now? Daniel Harper was done holding back. The second Drathari fell before it even understood what had killed the first bang. The sound echoed through the corridor like thunder trapped inside metal walls. I flinched. Not from the enemy, from Daniel. He moved forward slowly, deliberately, the strange weapon steady in his hands. There was no panic in his posture. No wasted motion. Every step calculated, controlled, predatory. This was not the same being who joked in the cargo bay. This was something else. Kale, he said, not taking his eyes off the corridor ahead. Can you stand? Yes, I managed, forcing myself upright despite the burning pain in my shoulder. Good. Stay behind me. The words should have offended me. A Varelian. Taking cover behind a human? Unthinkable. And yet, I obeyed. More movement ahead. 3 Drathari rounded the corner, their crimson optics locking onto us instantly. They didn't hesitate. They charged. 3 targets. I warned. I see them, Daniel replied calmly. He didn't raise his voice, didn't rush, didn't panic. The first Drathari lunged. Bang, dropped. Mid-stride, the second fired its pulse cannon. Daniel moved. Not a way forward. He stepped into the attack, twisting just enough for the blast to scorch past his shoulder. The heat singed the wall behind him. Impossible reflexes. Bang. Second target down. The third reached him, too close for ranged combat. Its bladed limb swung in a lethal arc. And Daniel did something I will never forget. He smiled. He dropped the weapon, let it fall. I stared in disbelief. Daniel, too late. The blade came down. He caught it with his bare hands. I felt my mind's fracture. The force alone should have severed his limbs, but he held it, strained. Yes, but held. Muscles tensed. Veins visible beneath that fragile human skin, then he twisted hard. A sickening crack echoed as the Drathari's limbs snapped out of alignment. The creature screeched. Daniel stepped in close, too close. This was not combat. This was something primal. He drove his elbow into the creature's central mass. Once, twice, a third time. Each strike. Precise, brutal, efficient, the Drathari staggered. Then Daniel picked up his weapon, pressed it against the creature's torso. Bang! Silence. I couldn't move, couldn't think, could barely process what I had just witnessed. You're bleeding, Daniel said. Glancing at my shoulder, I blinked. Yes, he nodded. We'll fix that later. There might not be a later. A deep vibration ran through the ship. Another breach. Different section, they were spreading. How many more? He asked. I accessed the internal sensors, my hands still trembling. 17. No, 21 remaining. They've split into squads. He exhaled slowly. Of course they did. You speak as if this is expected, I said. Basic boarding tactics, he replied. Control multiple Nikat choke points. Even in this moment he stumbled over language, human imperfection, human inconsistency, and yet, "They will overwhelm us," I said. "We should retreat to an escape pod." Daniel shook his head. "No. No," I repeated. "If we run, they take the ship," he said. "And if they take the ship, they take everything." His jaw tightened. "I'm not letting that happen. You cannot defeat 20 armed Drathari," I said bluntly. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes, not fear, not doubt, resolve. "You're thinking about this wrong," he said quietly. "They're not fighting 20 of us." He checked his weapon, reloaded with practiced precision. A sharp metallic click echoed. "They're fighting one human." I did not understand. Not yet. The lights flickered, dunked, emergency power rerouted. Sections of the ship went dark, only the red glow of warning signals remained. Daniel smiled, faintly. "Good. Good?" I snapped. "Yeah," he said. "Dark favors me." Before I could question that, he moved, fast, down the corridor, into the shadows. I hesitated only a moment before following, because staying alone was far more terrifying. We reached an intersection overlooking Cargo Bay. Daniel raised a hand, stopped me. Voices, clicks, Drathari communication signals, 5 of them, scanning, hunting. Daniel leaned close to me and whispered, "Stay here. Don't move. No matter what you hear. What are you—" Too late. He was already gone, slipping into the darkness like he belonged to it. Watched through the dim light, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to retreat. The Drathari spread out, weapons ready, perfect formation. Professional killers. One of them paused, tilted its head. It sensed something. Too late. Bang. The last Drathari in the formation dropped instantly. The others turned, but Daniel was already moving. Not standing still, not exposed, always moving. Another shot. Another body fell. The Drathari fired wildly into the darkness, but they were shooting at ghosts, at shadows, at fear. Daniel used the ship, the walls, the angles, every blind spot, every echo, every flicker of light. He wasn't just fighting them. He was controlling them. One by one, they fell. When the last body hit the floor, silence returned. Daniel stepped back into the faint red light, breathing steady, expression calm. "Area clear," he said. 5 Drathari eliminated in seconds. I stared at him. "No species fights like this," I whispered. He shrugged. "Yeah," he said, "we get that a lot." And in that moment, a terrifying realization settled into my mind. This wasn't strength, not in the way my species understood it. This was something far more dangerous. Adaptation, instinct, creativity, and violence. Humanity didn't survive because their world was easy. They survived because they made themselves impossible to kill. And now, the Drathari were learning that lesson, one body at a time. "Come on," Daniel said, turning toward the deeper sections of the ship. "We've still got a lot of uninvited guests." I followed, not as a superior, not even as an equal, but as someone who had just realized he had never truly understood humans at all. The silence after the last Drathari fell was not peace. It was waiting. The kind of silence that happens when a predator realizes the prey it chose is no longer running. Daniel stood in the dim red emergency light, motionless for a moment. The weapon in his hands was lowered but not relaxed. Nothing about him was relaxed anymore. He listened, not with sensors, not with instruments, with something deeper. "You hear that?" he asked quietly. I strained my senses. At first, nothing. Then, faint movement, metallic footsteps, multiple directions, coordinated again. "They're regrouping," I said. Daniel nodded once. "Yeah, they learned." That should have sounded like relief. It didn't. It sounded like anticipation. The ship shuddered as another section sealed off automatically. Emergency bulkheads slammed into place, isolating half the vessel. But it wasn't enough. They were already inside. Too many breaches, too many points of entry. How many now? Daniel asked. I checked the feed again. My system struggled to keep up. 13 remaining on board, but they are converging toward engineering and bridge access. He exhaled slowly. Good. Again. That word. Why do you keep saying that? I demanded. He finally looked at me, and for a moment I saw it. Not calm. Not confidence. Focus so deep it bordered on something inhuman. Because now they're predictable, he said. Before I could respond, he moved again. This time, slower. Controlled. Deliberate. He stopped at a wall panel and pried it open with practiced ease. Inside, maintenance conduits. Narrow, dark, a service path. You are entering that? I asked, horrified. That's where they'll go next, he said. How do you know? Daniel looked at me like the answer was obvious. Because it's what I'd do. That sentence chilled me more than any weapon ever could. He stepped into the maintenance shaft without hesitation, then paused. Looked back at me. You coming? I hesitated. Every instinct screamed no. But survival screamed louder. I followed. The tunnel was tight, claustrophobic. My frame barely fit through sections designed for automated repair drones. Daniel moved ahead like he belonged there. Silent, efficient. Then he stopped, held up a hand. Voices ahead, closer now. Drathari, 2 squads, at least 6 units. I whispered. We are outnumbered. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He studied the space, the angles, the vents, the access panels, like the ship itself was a puzzle. Then he smiled slightly. Not joy, not humor, something colder. No, he said quietly. They are. He pulled something from his belt. Small device, magnetic. He attached it to the tunnel wall, then another, and another. What are those? I asked. Old human trick, he said. Distraction. Before I could process that, he tapped my shoulder. Cover your ears. What? Too late. He triggered it. A deafening thump exploded through the ventilation system. Then another. Then a cascading series of metallic detonations echoing through the ship's guts. The entire corridor vibrated. The Drathari below reacted instantly. Confusion, movement, break in formation. Daniel didn't wait. He dropped into a lower access hatch. I followed instinctively, barely keeping up. We emerged above them, a catwalk overlooking Cargo Bay 4. 6 Drathari below, disoriented, scanning wildly. They think they're being surrounded, I whispered. Daniel nodded. That's the idea. He raised his weapon, but didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, he waited. Patient, still, breathing slow. The Drathari split their attention. Some looked upward, some toward the tunnels, some behind. They were uncertain now, fear creeping into their coordination. Daniel leaned closer to me. Watch, he said. Then he spoke, loud enough for them to hear. Calm, clear. You're lost. The Drathari froze. They didn't understand the language, but they understood intent. One fired upward blindly. Daniel moved, not away, down. He jumped. For a moment I thought he had committed suicide. The drop was too far, too reckless. But halfway down, he grabbed a support cable, swung, turned the fall into motion. He landed between them. 6 enemies, 1 human, and he did not hesitate. What followed was not a battle. It was collapse. The first Drathari turned too slowly. Bang down. Second charged. Daniel sidestepped, grabbed its arm, twisted. A snap echoed. Then another shot. Third fired at point-blank range. He ducked under the blast and drove his weapon upward. Bang. Chaos erupted. The Drathari lost formation entirely. Their greatest strength, coordination, was gone. Daniel didn't fight them equally. He separated them, forced angles, created distance where there should have been none. He turned the battlefield into something only he understood. One by one, they fell. When it was over, only silence remained again. Daniel stood among them, breathing heavier now, sweat on his brow, a faint burn mark on his shoulder. But alive, still alive. He looked up toward me. "Clear," he said again. I couldn't speak, not because I lacked words, because everything I believed about combat, survival, strength, was breaking. "You planned that," I finally whispered. Daniel shrugged slightly. "Improvised." "You turned them against each other." "Yeah." "You used fear." He tilted his head. "I used confusion. Fear just came with it." I stared at him. "You are not trained like us." He gave a small, tired smile. "No," he said. "We're trained by losing." That line hit harder than any weapon, because I realized something I did not want to accept. The Drathari were warriors, the Varelians were survivors, the council races were strategists. But humans were something else entirely. They were what remained after survival stopped being enough. Daniel turned toward the next corridor. "We're not done," he said. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because I understood now. Stopping him was no longer an option. They stopped calling it a boarding operation. That was the first sign of panic. From the Drathari command feed I intercepted through ship residual channels, their coordination had fractured. Orders overlapped, routes changed mid-execution. Entire squads went silent without explanation. On a tactical level, it made no sense. On a psychological level, it was fear. I should not have been able to understand their communications, but fear translates itself across all species. Daniel moved through the ship like he already knew where every Drathari would be before they arrived. And the terrifying part was, he was usually right. "Bridge access sealed," I reported, following him through a dim maintenance corridor. "They're not going for the bridge anymore," Daniel said. "Then where?" He stopped at a junction, looked at the floor, then the ceiling, then the walls, like he was reading the ship's bones. "Engineering," he said finally. "They want control of propulsion, escape routes, power redistribution." I frowned. "That is logical." "Yeah," Daniel replied. "That's why they'll do it." He knelt beside a panel and pried it open. Inside wiring, coolant lines, emergency cutoffs. He began working without explanation, fast, precise, too familiar. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Changing the terrain," he said. "That is a ship, not terrain." Daniel looked up at me. "Everything is terrain," he replied. A faint vibration ran through the floor. More movement. Closer. "They're regrouping again," I said. "No," Daniel corrected. "They're trying to stop bleeding out." Before I could ask what he meant, he sealed the panel and stood. "Come on." We moved. But something had changed. The Drathari were no longer advancing confidently. They were probing, testing, hesitating, and that hesitation was fatal. We reached a junction overlooking engineering access. Below us, through reinforced glass, I saw them. 8 Drathari, heavily armed, moving carefully now. No longer rushing. No longer hunting. Watching. "They're afraid," I whispered. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He watched them like a predator studying injured prey. "Not afraid," he said finally. "Cautious." "What is the difference?" He glanced at me. "Fear makes you stop. Caution makes you slow down." He raised his weapon slightly. "I just need them to slow down more." That sentence should have reassured me. It did not. He activated something on his wrist device, a small signal pulse. "What did you do?" I asked. "Turned off their map," he said. I froze. "That is impossible." "Their ships are synchronized." "Not anymore," he interrupted. "They're inside ours now. Our systems overwrite theirs." A pause. Then, the Drathari below stopped. Confusion rippled through their formation. One gestured urgently, another checked its interface. Nothing matched. Their coordination broke just slightly, but enough. Daniel moved. Not fast, not reckless, controlled. He opened a maintenance hatch above them, dropped a small device. It landed silently. For a second, nothing happened. Then the lights in engineering flickered once, twice, and all hell broke loose. Emergency systems misfired. Doors sealed incorrectly, gravity. Plates shifted unevenly. The Drathari stumbled. Instantly, one slammed into a bulkhead, another lost footing entirely. "What did you do?" I repeated, alarm rising. Daniel didn't answer. He was already moving. "Kale," he said, "stay here." "No," I snapped. "You will not stay." The tone changed. Not command, not request, certainty. And for the first time, I obeyed without argument. He dropped into engineering access alone. I watched through the reinforced glass, my pulse spiking. My species does not experience fear easily. But what I felt now was close. Below, the Drathari attempted to regain control. Too late. Daniel was already among them. But this time, he did not engage immediately. He waited. Let the environment do the work. Gravity shifted again. One Drathari floated upward, slightly confused, exposed. Bang, down. Another. Turned, too slow. Bang. The Drathari tried to adapt. They couldn't. The environment was no longer stable, nothing predictable, nothing reliable. And Daniel thrived in that chaos. He moved between them like he was part of the malfunction itself, not fighting them, guiding them into failure. One of the Drathari finally spoke into its comms, loud, panicked. "This is not a ship operation." The transmission cut off mid-sentence, because Daniel had reached it. I saw it clearly now. This was no longer combat. It was dismantling, systematic, patient, absolute. When the last Drathari in engineering collapsed, Daniel stood still for a moment, breathing. Steady, weapon lowered. Then he spoke into the silence, not to me, not to them, to whoever might still be listening. "This is your last warning." No response came, only static and the distant sound of retreating footsteps through sealed corridors. For the first time, they were pulling back. "Daniel," I said softly through comms. He looked up toward me, face lit by flickering emergency lights. "They're retreating," I said. He nodded once. "Yeah." I hesitated. "That is victory." Daniel did not look convinced. "No," he said quietly. "That's regrouping." A pause. Then he added, "They're learning." And that was when I understood the most terrifying truth yet. We had not defeated them, we had educated them. And whatever came next would not be disorganized, would not be hesitant, would not be afraid, it would be prepared. Daniel turned away from engineering, started walking back toward me. "We're not done," he said again, but this time, even I could hear it, he was no longer hunting. He was waiting for the next phase of the war. They stopped boarding us. That was the first real change, not retreat, not surrender, something far more unsettling. Silence spread through the ship. Not the calm kind, the empty kind, like a predator had stopped chasing prey, because it had decided to circle instead. Daniel stood in the center corridor, motionless, listening. His weapon was no longer raised. It was resting at his side, but I had learned by now that did not mean he was less dangerous. It meant he was deciding how much danger was necessary. "They've stopped moving," I said. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, that is illogical," I added. "They still have numbers advantage." Glanced at me. "They're not trying to win a fight anymore." A pause. "They're trying to understand me." That sentence chilled me more than any weapon fire. A low vibration ran through the ship, not impact, communication, long-range, external. Checked the feed and froze. "Daniel," I whispered. He already knew. "Yeah," he said, quietly. "They called for help." My systems expanded the signal, multiple signatures. Drathari, war vessels, not a raid anymore. Response fleet, not a boarding action, they are escalating, I said. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Good." I turned toward him sharply. "That is not good." He gave a faint, hard smile. "It means they're taking us seriously." A pause. Then he added, "I hate it when they take us seriously." The ship trembled again. But this time, it wasn't Drathari inside, it was something docking outside. Multiple impacts, heavy, coordinated, new arrivals. "They're here," I whispered. Daniel lifted his head slightly. "Yeah, And then the alarms changed. Not red, not warning. Black, hostile. Armada boarding confirmed the Drathari were no longer sending squads, they were sending forces. Entire hull sections shook as magnetic clamps locked in, breaching charges, ignited across multiple points. Simultaneously, this was not infiltration anymore, this was demolition. Even I understood it now. They were willing to destroy the ship. Just to remove him. Daniel, I said carefully, we should evacuate. Escape pods. He shook his head. No. I stared at him. That is not a tactical decision. He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't smile. It is now. He walked toward the central junction, not away from the fight, into it. I followed. Because at this point, there was nothing else left to do. The moment we reached the main corridor, the hull exploded inward, not a breach, a rupture. Entire sections torn open, vacuum alarms screamed, red lights flickered violently, and through the broken metal, they came. Not Drathari squads, Drathari soldiers, heavily armored, heavy weapon platforms, anti-human doctrine units. They had adapted, learned, evolved in real time. And now, they had come prepared for him. Daniel stopped walking. Did they? A strange stillness filled the corridor. Two forces, one human. The Drathari commander stepped forward. Larger armor, more segmented. Plating, voice transmitted through external. Speakers. Cold controlled, human entity, it said. You are contained. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Am I? You have disrupted a classified extraction operation. You have eliminated sanctioned personnel. You will now be terminated. A pause. Then, all. Resistance will end as Daniel looked around, at the broken ship, at the destroyed corridors, at the approaching force. Then he nodded, slowly, like he finally understood something. Yeah, he said. That sounds about right. He raised his weapon, but not at them, at the ship. I didn't understand. Daniel, what are you doing? He didn't look at me. Ending the conversation, he fired, not at enemies. Control panels, at junction relays, at power. Conduits, the ship screamed. Systems collapsed instantly, lights died, gravity shifted. Violently, entire sections shut down. The Drathari paused confused, for the first time, uncertain. Daniel spoke calmly. To survive in space, he said, you don't fight harder. He stepped forward, closer, to them. You change the rules. He pulled a final device from his belt, small, simple, human-made, and activated it. Every emergency bulkhead on the ship slammed shut, simultaneously, sealing corridors dividing, forces breaking formations. The Drathari were split, instantly isolated, disconnected, and their greatest strength, coordination, gone. And then Daniel did something I did not expect. He dropped his weapon. Again, the Drathari hesitated, just a fraction. That fraction was enough, because Daniel didn't need the weapon anymore. He moved into them, bare. Hands were. What followed was not a fight, not anymore. It was collapse of certainty. Each Drathari unit expecting coordinated resistance found none, only unpredictability, only human movement, only impossible timing. They adapted too slowly, every time, one by one. They fell, not because they were weaker, but because they were late. When the last armored unit dropped, silence returned again. But this time, it felt heavier, permanent. Daniel stood in the wreckage, breathing slowly, covered in soot and scorch marks. Alive, still alive. He looked at me, and for the first time in the entire encounter, he looked tired. They'll be back, I said quietly. Daniel nodded. Yeah. A pause. Then I asked, was this victory? He considered that long quiet. No, he said finally. This was a message. To who? I asked. Daniel looked toward the broken hull of space beyond, where distant ships were already gathering. To everyone who thought humans were easy prey. He exhaled and added, almost softly, they're going to learn. And in that moment, I finally understood. The Drathari had not invaded a ship. They had entered a warning, and humanity had just responded.